Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Sheikh, what would your advice be to African Muslims in the West to safeguard their faith and to empower themselves collectively?
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I think for Muslims coming here from the African continent, or actually anywhere else, you're going to face many challenges, and we can see these challenges all around us. Some of these challenges would really be targeting your religion and the extent to which you can assimilate into the dominant group, or the group that is targeting you, whether it is atheists, whether it's Christians, whether it's agnostics, whatever. So number one, you've got those currents that will challenge your religious identity. There are those things that will challenge your cultural identity, and depends on what culture we are talking about or the subculture you belong to. Does it challenge just your being a sub-Saharan African, for example, or just African or Nigerian or wherever you come from, or even if you are in Nigeria, you belong to a particular ethnic group, you would find difficulties continuing to learn your language, practicing your language, so you will gradually lose your language. You will find it more difficult to raise your children with the customary norms and mores and practices that back at home would be expected. The ways of showing courtesy, the way you handle how you talk to people and whether you look them in the eyes or not, and how you greet people, and the power distance that usually various cultures have. So all these will be challenged. What is critical is for us to recognize what is core, because Islam as a way of life, as a deen, has been described by a great scholar as being like a river or a stream that flows over different colors of rocks and soils and takes the color of its surrounding environment. And so we will see Islam has adapted to China. We have seen Islam adapting to Bangladesh, and Islam adapting into the Arab world and adapting here and there in Africa, in South America, etc. And it will have to, and it has in many ways adapted to Europe. So the key thing is to find out what about Islam is, or what we bring into the Western world from where we come from. What aspect is Islam as an essential part of the religion, and what is it that's a cultural practice that Islam has no problem with in that context, nor does Islam have a problem with the Western alternative. So there are many areas, from the food to the systems of healthcare to the transport, the role of technology and medicine, all sorts of aspects of society and the social life, some forms of entertainment that Islam has no problem with, others that it does have a problem with, or that may be haram, certain forms of dressing that are Islamic in that they have met Islamic requirements, but they're clearly Western and belong to this context. So you can see where Islam would slightly modify an aspect of a culture that has not been influenced by Islam until you have Western ways of dressing Islamically for women and for men. So when we look at how can Muslims who come from Africa or come from Nigeria, and Africa is very diverse, so one can't really speak for everyone, just as Nigeria is diverse, as every other country has its own diversity. So when people come here, I think what is important for Muslims is to learn the fundamentals of Islam, to learn at least an introduction to the higher objectives or maqasid of Sharia, the higher purpose of Islamic way of life, because then you become more sensitive to those values that Islam actually encourages, even though it's being achieved in a different way. To study even just the fundamentals of usulul fiqh, the principles of Islamic jurisprudence. And the reason why this has become important is because we have so many people giving contrary fatwas that we become like people in the country of the blind. We don't know the difference between the one-eyed and the two-eyed. We don't know the differences between scholars who know what they're talking about. And so unfortunately, many take the default position of, we'll just go with the majority opinion. We'll just go with what the majority says. And you neglect the specialist who actually has studied the situation, has lived in this country long enough, has done the filtering of what's acceptable, what's appropriate in this context, and what is not. So in Islam, truth is not determined by majority. It's determined by its evidence. And if you are not good enough to even assess evidence, then how do you determine what's a good opinion or a harmful opinion, what's a more appropriate opinion, and what's another opinion that is contradictory, may be appropriate for another context or another time? So it's not about always right and wrong, but what is right for one context and what's right for another context, just like medicine. So it's important for Muslims to have enough basic, essential understanding of the principles of Islamic jurisprudence, the Islamic maxims and legal philosophy, which is Qawaid al-Fiqhiyya, and the higher intent and objectives of Islamic law, Maqasid Sharia. What these do is they give Muslims critical thinking tools that are rooted in their faith, tools that allow them to navigate the context they live in and the various opinions and fatwas that are sent their way by various people. Some scholar just came fresh off the boat, just landed, does not know the context and wants to give a prescription. That's similar to a pharmacist trying to give a prescription. The difference between, a doctor has been trained in how to diagnose, how to find out what's the real issue, to know a bit about your background, your context. So it's important for us to be really more discerning, more critical as we listen to various opinions. And this is because if you look at the opinions that are considered opinions in Islamic law, or opinions in Islamic jurisprudence or fiqh or any other major topic, these are the gathered opinions of thousands of scholars over 1,400 years, all collected into what is called Islamic teachings or Islamic jurisprudence or fiqh. So when you say, what is Islam's position on this issue, you would have to narrow that question down. You have to what's Islam's position on this issue in this context? And is there that opinion given by past scholars that is related to my context? Or would it require new ijtihad? Because all scholars agree with the change in context, change in fatwas. And so as Muslims live here, as people coming from Africa, and you hear opinions that are very different from the Maliki opinion, which many of us are used to if we come from West Africa, or the Shafi opinions of East Africa, the Somali, Kenya, Tanzania areas. When you hear opinions that are different, it's not about are they right or wrong, but probably more appropriate to the current context. And so it's important to come with humility, even if you are an excellent scholar from where we come from, to look at the new context and not just copy-paste fatwas, and not just expect your children to repeat and live life with the same kind of curriculum as they had there. Here, there are new issues your children will start asking. There are things they are being taught in school that you may disagree with, and you'd have to learn to vaccinate them, to be able to guide them, so that at least they have a Islamic paradigm and a worldview that they operate in, while appreciating the cultural and uniqueness of this society. The reason is because, as Allah says in Surah Al-Hujurat, after saying how He created us into males and females, nations and tribes, in other words, the cultural, ethnic diversity, He says, لِتَعَارَفُوا, that you may get to know one another. And ta'araf means I know you, you know me. Why would Allah want us to learn more about each other? Because in that diversity is our growth. That's where we see what we have in common, where we agree with, where we disagree, but where sometimes the disagreement is just because I'm not used to something I have not seen. It's not necessarily bad, it may be an alternative good. Sometimes it is bad, but it helps me appreciate and I'm able to share with others. So I feel it is important for Muslims to always belong to a jama'ah, always belong to a group. Whether it's an ethnic group, we're proud of our families. There's nothing wrong in being proud of a family. There's nothing wrong in being proud of your tribe, or proud of your ethnicity, or proud of your nation, or proud of your culture or your language. These are all gifts from Allah. So I am proud of those identities that Allah has made me. But I am not allowed to look down upon another person. Why? That's Allah's gift for them. And mine is what Allah will test me with. So I'm proud that I am Nupe by tribe. I'm proud that I am Nigerian. But I don't look down upon somebody who is Swahili or Chinese or British or anything else, or English, or any particular ethnic group. I am proud of my language. But why? Because language is something that's a gift from Allah to humanity. And so I don't look down upon other languages. Oh, this language is better than that language. This language is superior. No. Languages have a function in helping us communicate. And so Arabic is essential for the purpose of understanding the Quran and the Sunnah better. It's not a superior language in and of itself. Some would say, well, yes, the structure gives it more flexibility and richness, but you will find other languages that can compete in some of these ways. And these are all gifts from Allah. The ability to write. You don't say writing in this language is superior to writing in that language. Allah says, Allama bil kalam, allama al insana ma lam ya'lam. Allah taught humanity by the pen, and through that we learn things we never knew before. It is through the pen that history and information and innovations and thoughts of the past have come to us. So we appreciate it in every language. And so what I would suggest is, for Muslims, number one, you can't influence things in any positive way if you want to keep away from everything. So there's a level of engagement you would need in order to be known, to be understood, and to be able to influence positively. But also for you to be influenced positively. We shouldn't have this neurotic view of everything that is other than our own as something we should be afraid of and we don't want to mix with. You can't influence things if you are not ready to be influenced yourself. So you must understand, but you have to have a very clear criteria of right and wrong, the boundaries of tolerance in Islam, what Islam will accommodate, what Islam may frown upon but not consider prohibited, what Islam would discourage, and what Islam would actually prohibit, or even what Islam would actually recommend as a fardu kifaya, a communal obligation that Muslims should participate in, such as the nature this society involves in, since it's going to be the home of our children and the home of our grandchildren. So we'd like to leave a spiritual legacy behind. We'd like to leave institutions that are able to cater for our unique needs, just as other communities cater for their own unique needs. And it's not looking down upon others, but the need for us to preserve what is dear to us that is not haram. So I may want to preserve certain aspects of my culture while I'm here, and somebody wants to preserve another aspect of their culture, which is good. But we need to be critical and ensure that in trying to preserve our culture, we do not undermine our religious commitment. So there may be certain cultural practices back at home that they're okay, but when you think about them, after meeting other cultures, you realize that's actually not a good idea. That's not the best way to bring children. That's not the best way to discipline children. That's not the best way to speak to or talk to government or talk to leaders. Actually, they have a better way of organizing some aspects of society here that's really worth appreciating. They have some very good manners regarding giving seats to older people and courtesies that are really good. Some of us come from cultures where you don't open the door for somebody. Why? Because opening the door of a car is not part of the culture. Everybody just gets into your car. Giving a seat to a lady or somebody in a restaurant may not be something we're used to at home, because probably we don't have a culture that is used to going out and eating out. So there are certain aspects of culture that are not really as developed in our societies as they are here. But it's important here to know the maqasid, what's the objective. If this is a way of showing courtesy, then it's good to learn it. And if it doesn't contradict anything in Sharia, then it's something we should embrace. But very importantly, as we try to protect our deen, it's important we distinguish what are those things that we have been taught are deen, which are actually cultural practices, but which by meeting other Muslims from other parts of the world, Muslims who have been here longer than we have, Muslims that have faced challenges that we are just facing, to try and learn from other Muslim groups. So I would suggest that Muslims who come from Africa or any other place where after landing here they find, oh, there's a Turkish group, there's a Bangladeshi group, there's that group, what about us? Yes, see how to come together. Look at anything you have in common. What can help greater, greater social cohesion on any level, on the neighborhood level, on the community level, on the national level, anything that would help in the enjoining of right and the forbidding of wrong, of encouraging what is good, of discouraging and preparing people to change society and influence society for the better. There are many who need special attention. The government can't do everything. And so the Muslim has the responsibility of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar, of enjoining right and forbidding wrong, and nothing better than doing it with the wisdom of a crowd, of the wisdom of a group, especially where you have people of the older generation and the younger generation having shura and consulting with each other in how to address new problems. Those who have been here longer, those who are second generation, third generation, and first generation, so that there's a more seamless transition as we leave a legacy of adaptation and adaptability. People say coming to a particular country is like a melting pot. The reality is we see nobody's really melting in the complete sense. You still have certain very strong portions of the community that have not melted in the sense you would say vanilla and strawberry ice cream have melted and now it's vanilla strawberry. No, you have a little of that, but you still have people's identities that are cultural, ethnic, racial identities still strong. So it's important to realize that these identities aren't all going to go away. We're going to have to live with them. But one thing is, how do we manage it so that we're able to preserve our faith, share it with others, be a light and guidance to others, and be able to ensure that we leave a spiritual legacy for our children to also follow, and for them to also make sure that the society becomes a better society for everyone. I conclude with Allah's ayah, "Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas ta'maruna bil ma'ruf wa tanhauna 'anil munkar wa tu'minuna billah." Allah says, you are the best community that has been raised for mankind. You have faith, you enjoin what is right, you forbid what is wrong, and you have faith in Allah. And it's very important when it says, "Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas," best community raised for mankind. It's not just for yourself and your self-preservation, but you have to ask yourself, how can we positively contribute to a better life for everyone in this society? You must live a life such that when you leave, things are all better, even if it's just a bit, as a result of your presence there, or what good you've been able to bring, what bad you've been able to reduce, but not to stay neutral. We must make society and humanity better as a result of our presence there. And may Allah continue to guide us and forgive us for our mistakes.